Hey, Mickey. I say, hey, Mickey. Oh, boy. You know, each week I say, how can Mickey surpass the bar he sat last week in terms of visual gags? But I would say this just about gets it. For folks listening on audio, that was a whole tray full of chattering teeth.
And Bob, why was that relevant?
Beats me. You tell me. I'm guessing it's related to infrastructure. Oh, there's a close-up of a single mouthful of chattering teeth. Even more effective than multiple mouthfuls.
Bob, what is at stake in the infrastructure bill? There's some provision you're particularly fond of.
Mickey, I'm let's see. Provision I don't know, free community college? No. Oh, no. Dental coverage is in Medicare? Not going to happen? Don't tell me. Say it ain't so.
No, it might happen. Manchin seems to like it, but
I would imagine.
But Clyburn
you ever
doesn't.
Been to West Virginia? What?
Well, it was dead, which is when I ordered those chattering teeth. But now it seems to be alive because of Manchin. I actually don't know. The conventional wisdom was that they were fighting over whether to. But
wait, I got to interject. Did you say you ordered those chattering teeth for this occasion?
Because I have chattering teeth lying around just in case.
Well, the reason I ask is sometimes people ask, like they say, well, look, I'd love to join your Parrot Room Patreon, but how can I be sure that the money will be well spent? They ask this question, and Mickey, you've just given them the answer. That is tremendous marketing on your part. Thank you.
You know, these things aren't getting any cheaper.
No, I would imagine that one's like several dollars right there.
Anyway, the reconciliation bill, which is the Democrats' big grab bag bill of spend the money now before we lose Congress. This is our last chance. So let's load up all the spending we want into this one big bill. But there wasn't quite enough to cover both expanding Medicare to cover dental and extending Medicaid to cover those states that didn't expand it under the Obamacare law. It gave the states an option and some states didn't do it. So do you want to cover poor people with Medicaid, or do you want to give seniors who are of all income levels more coverage that only starts in 2028, Bob? I don't know how old you'll be at 2028, but
we don't want to think about that. But just to be clear, would the Medicaid thing would have taken the discretion away from the governors, because a lot of Republican governors chose not to do that.
I think it would have said, okay, governors, you don't want Medicaid. We're going to come in and do it anyway,
right,
in your state.
Okay.
Most governors have taken it, but some haven't. So I think it was going to be a sort of federal subsidy / takeover of that. Clyburn was winning, and Bernie Sanders, who's the dental care guy, was losing, and they were going to spend the money on Medicaid, which sort of makes sense. I mean, if there are poor people who aren't covered, you want to cover them before you give extra coverage to the elderly. On the other hand, Obamacare is a ridiculous stratified system where there's Medicaid, and then there's the Obamacare exchanges, and then there's your private healthcare plan. And then when you're 65, you breathe a huge sigh of relief because you're in Medicare and your problems are solved.
Right.
So why not build on Medicare instead of this ridiculous tiered system? But it looked like that you were going to lose your dental care, but now it's back on the table, I think.
Wow, you're paying attention at a pretty micro level. I didn't realize details at that level were even available.
Well, that was available about a week and a half ago. Lately, there have been no details available. That's the problem. What the situation is? You say you haven't been following it?
Well, as of last night, I kind of tried to follow it. Today, I was busy getting a newsletter half out. But
okay. Well, basically, what happened is there are these two bills. There's the little hard infrastructure bill that everybody likes that passed the Senate, and all the House has to do is pass it, and it's law. But no, the progressives have decided they don't want to do that bill until they get the big bloated.
Whoa! Don't make it sound like a last minute decision. I believe they thought that was the deal they had from the beginning, and when the Democratic senators voted when the more progressive Democratic senators voted for the bipartisan hard infrastructure bill, they were told that there would be linkage. We would make sure that the bigger soft infrastructure bill was going to pass as well.
There was no deal, but Pelosi said that she would link them and not do the one until you had the other.
Yeah,
and it was clearly the strategy, but there was no deal. There was no deal stuff is bullshit.
You don't think she reassured her reluctant progressives of that?
Yes, but that's not a deal. She can't bind Manchin. Manchin and Sinema did not cut a deal. There was no deal. Pelosi can say,
no.
I assure you we won't do it.
Wait.
That's not a deal. That's Pelosi assuring them. And then what happened, just let me finish the story. What happened at the beginning of this week is Pelosi decided, okay, I'm going to screw the progressives. We're going to have the little bill without the big bill. Then the progressives stood strong. Then Pelosi flipped back and screwed the moderates and said, okay, we're going to link the two. We're not going to do anything until we have the details. But really her plan was an idea so crazy it just might have worked, which is we're going to actually hash out the big bill, which is nowhere near done, in 2 days, and then we're going to pass them both, okay? Or at least come close enough to the big bill. We're going to have a framework that we can sell to the progressives, and then we can pass the little one.
Will sign on to,
and then we will have a deal with Manchin and Sinema. And
But to be clear, I'm not saying she ever had a deal with Manchin and Sinema, or that anybody did. No, the deal was, the reassurance was given to progressives that by linking the two, they could guarantee them that hard infrastructure would not pass unless Manchin and Sinema got on board with soft infrastructure, and that would be the leverage that encouraged them to get on board. That was the idea.
Deal between?
That was the understanding.
There have to be parties to a deal.
I believe that's what they told progressive senators who voted for hard infrastructure.
Who is the they who told the
I assume Schumer and Pelosi. I don't know. That's what I've heard. You're sure it's not true?
The reporters I trust, like Bill Scher of Blogging Heads, have said there's no deal, that the deal was, that this talk of a deal is bullshit. It's possible, but that Pelosi told them that, then they should be pissed at Pelosi, because then Pelosi's reneging on a deal of hers. But there was no deal. They imply there was a deal that everybody signed off on, and that's just not true.
No, I'm not saying Manchin and Sinema signed off. They're the whole problem. The deal would be designed to create leverage used on them.
Well, so progressives negotiate among themselves, and they decide we have a deal among ourselves that we're not going to pass this bill. Well, who gives a shit about that? That's nothing. That's just them saying we're determined to do this.
Well,
and then when it meets the immovable object, the deal sort of collapses.
I don't want to belabor this.
It's not a deal.
I don't want to belabor this. But what I'm saying is the deal was between the congressional leadership on the Democratic side and the progressive Democrats, who were told you can vote for hard infrastructure now and be assured it will not pass unless soft infrastructure passes. And that is within Pelosi's power to deliver on. It may mean that neither passes, but it's within her power to see that that's done.
I haven't seen the leader of the progressives, whose name I don't want to mispronounce, Jayapal.
That's better than I could have done.
I haven't heard her say, Pelosi, we had this deal with you. They just talk about the deal as if it's a deal that the moderates are reneging on. And I don't think that's true. It may be a deal that Pelosi is reneging on. She has to have reneged on a deal since she screwed one side and then screwed the other side. And so miraculously, nobody is pissed at her.
Mickey,
pissed at her yet.
If she reneged on a deal, then there was a deal. I don't want to belabor this.
But it could have been a deal between AOC and Ilhan Omar. It's still a deal. That's not the deal that counts. The deal that would count would be the progressives and the opponents of the progressives, and there was no such deal. So you can't accuse the opponents of the progressives of violating a deal because they want to pass their little bill.
I'm sure people are really getting sick of me dwelling on this, but you said Pelosi reneged, so she must have been involved in the deal. And that's all I'm saying. The deal was between her and maybe also Schumer and progressive Democrats. It's not complicated.
That was the deal. Reneged. What's coming out is that
she did.
But who cares? What Pelosi? Really, their beef is with one of their own, Pelosi. I mean, come on. No, they're pretending that they have some grievance against the larger forces arrayed against them, and they don't. Ask Bill Scher. You can have Bill Scher on Blogging Heads and ask him.
I don't have to ask him because I'm not disagreeing with him, Mickey.
Okay, so what are we fighting about?
You keep saying there was no deal whatsoever, and I'm describing a kind of deal there was. And this is the only deal I've ever heard of. I haven't even heard anybody say that Manchin promised to $3.5 trillion soft infrastructure. Who's saying that?
They do intimate that when Manchin and Sinema signed the budget deal establishing the rule and the framework for the debate, that they agreed to this. And they say, no, I specifically said at the time, I'm not going for the 3.5 trillion. I'm going for a smaller number.
I assume that all along.
Say there was the suggestion that they somehow signed on when they signed on.
Well, that's obvious bullshit because the whole logic behind the deal I described was to use leverage against them, knowing that they hadn't signed on. But anyway, we agree on basically what happened, I think.
Okay. Well, there's anyway, Pelosi and Schumer, there are important things that they haven't said to each other. Like Schumer says Pelosi didn't tell him when she decided to flip on the progressives and renounce this so-called deal before she reinstated it or tried to reinstate it. And Schumer never told Pelosi that Manchin had signed a fairly detailed memo saying what his negotiating demands were. So the progressive has spent the last month saying, why doesn't Manchin say what his demands were when Schumer had the piece of paper in his hand?
Well, he
knew what the demands were.
This is what's puzzling to me is now we're hearing, maybe we've heard more since yesterday, but suddenly we're hearing Manchin won't go above 1.5 trillion. Well, look, if that's his position now, either he should have made that clear earlier, and you're saying he did, or we have a bunch of really bad journalists in America, because if that hasn't leaked, and it's been on the table for like a month, we have a reporting problem here.
The answer is, at the time, I distinctly remember him saying 1.5 or maybe 2.
He said that publicly?
At the very time around when the infrastructure bill, the little one, passed the Senate, he said, look, I'm not going for this 3.5. My line is 1.5. So he's been pretty clear the range he's at.
Why is everyone sounding surprised?
He signed this piece of paper with Schumer, and I don't know why it didn't leak. I guess they were holding it for the end, but then it finally did leak.
So the big question for you is, and I assume I know the answer, that suppose Manchin holds the line. I mean, first of all, suppose this does, well, let's back up. You've been paying attention. What is the state of play? There is not going to be a vote today. Today's
Friday. The state
of
play is Pelosi was talking as if she was actually going to get this big framework in place, which is a Herculean task, and you actually have to admire her for having the energy to even get close.
She's older than us. You realize that this woman is older than us and still functioning.
She must take some kind of vitamin pill.
I'll have what she's having.
But anyway, she said there was going to be a vote last night. They put that off, but they've technically kept the legislative day open. So in Congress, it's still September 30th, and they thought that they were going to continue in the morning, but in the morning, sort of things seem to have sort of gone back to entropy. I mean, Sinema's gone to Arizona. She's in contact, but there's no voting is anywhere near in sight. What's happening now is Biden is traveling to Capitol Hill, even as we speak, and giving a sort of pep rally to the Democrats. But this is a key point, because nobody's really quite sure what Biden wants. I mean, Biden clearly wants both bills, and he wants as much of them as possible. But does he want them to pass the little bill? You would think he would. It'd give him an achievement.
Sure.
Yes, it puts off. Puts the big bill in jeopardy of being watered down. And he hasn't come down on the progressives, according to them, for stalling the little bill. But he hasn't really. He hasn't really said, no, I want both bills. The progressives are right. He's been sort of vague and mushy, and maybe in this talk he will stop being vague and mushy. If he had come down on the progressives with his full force, they would have had the bill, but he didn't.
You think?
I think if a president calls the people in the office and say, you really got to do this. I promise you, we're not going to abandon you later.
I saw something
that carries a lot of weight.
I saw some headline just now that he was addressing Democrats in Congress or something.
That's what I'm talking about.
Okay. So he is doing that.
That's the pep rally I talked about.
Okay. So, I would, first of all, I would think he would take the bird in hand and hope for something on the other front. Because, first of all, assuming he runs again, which I is certainly not guaranteed, and half of me hopes doesn't happen. We won't have to worry about the nomination. That's where not getting soft infrastructure would give you the most trouble, right?
I agree. I think he's fine if he just gets the hard bill, the little hard bill, and doesn't get his big bill. I think he's certainly fine for the nomination and fine for re-election. Nobody's going to, if the economy is in okay shape and the pandemic's under control, nobody's going to care that he didn't pass his bloated daycare bill. I'm sorry.
Well, I don't think he's fine for re-election, but that's another question. I do think the main point is that hard infrastructure, as far as legislative achievement, that would stand him in fairly good stead for general election.
I think the White House is probably riven with disputes on this. There are probably some people who say take the bird in the hand. There are other people who say go for the big one. And I think maybe he thinks he's achieving strategic ambiguity, but so far he's achieved nothing because they haven't passed either.
But
bill.
Is it clear that he can have the bird in hand? The progressives are talking seriously about walking. Bernie Sanders, is urging them to walk if they don't pair the two.
Yes, he could have countered that if he'd been. I think he could have gotten just enough, maybe if he'd come down on them hard, if he'd committed to saying, I got to have this little bill. But he didn't.
So what do you think is going to happen?
They go on some sort of little vacation soon. I don't think they're going to get anything done, but they were making noises that they were going to vote today. I don't think they're going to vote today. Maybe I'll be proved wrong by the time this podcast goes up, but I don't think they're going to vote today. I think eventually they will hammer out some sort of deal with Manchin and Sinema for some sort of framework. Will that be enough for the progressive? The progressives say no. The progressives say you have to flush out the bill, actually write it with all the details, and then pass it, and then we'll consider voting for both. I sort of think that won't fly. I think they will do something, and it will have the hard bill. It will have parts of the soft bill, and the key question is what parts. And and they could have it now if they just agreed to whatever Manchin and Sinema want, which is not nothing. $1.5 trillion.
It's not nothing, but it's for progressives who started off thinking about 3.5 trillion.
They started off thinking of 6 or 10 or something.
Okay, exactly. So it's kind of a bitter pill. Especially given that we're not just talking about numbers. There's actual things they wanted that won't be in there. And the question is, what are those? Now, I assume you're on cloud 9 because I assume if Manchin keeps it to at least to no more than 2 trillion, your bête noire, which is child tax credit that's not restricted to working parents, would be out the window, right?
That's not clear at all. My
condolences, Mickey.
Everybody's now coming up with here are the 3 things they should include if they have to, throw everything else overboard. And usually the child tax credit is in there. It might only be for a few years. And the crucial issue, which is, will there be a work test? And keep in mind, the work test does not mean a bureaucratic, I require you to show up at this job site, and if you don't, I'll take you off. It's just it's the same rule that was there before 2020, which is, you don't get the credit until you earn $2,500, not a high amount. And the credit then phases in at 15% of your income until like 15 or 18 when you get the full credit. So nobody takes anything away. You just don't qualify, and it lops off the bottom 20% of the people who get the credit. But it also enforces the idea that you don't get it unless you're, in some sense, a working household. So Manchin has said he's for that, or he's for some sort of work requirement. He reiterated it again yesterday, but with Manchin, you never know. Is he just saying that to please the folks back home and he'll give up on it in the negotiating room? Can he be bought off with more favors for coal, which are also in his list of demands? So he gets the coal, and but the environmental lobby is pretty anti-coal, so you would think there would be resistance to that. It's really just up to Manchin. I mean, there are other senators who are for a work requirement, like Marco Rubio and Tom Cotton, and allegedly Lee of Utah, but Manchin is the main guy, and the answer is I don't know. I'm on tenterhooks. I'm trying to find out.
I know you are. What about free community college? Is that on the
that's
chopping
not on
block?
any of the lists.
It's not on. It's not considered excisable by anyone.
No, it is considered excisable, but I think it is excisable, but I'm not sure. But Biden gave a speech to the Democrats where he said, okay, instead of 15 things, you only get 10 things. Well, I think it's, he maybe even that might be optimistic, but I haven't heard anybody say community college is on our list of the 5 or 10 things we're going to save.
I see.
But I don't know. It's possible. The community college lobby is very powerful.
So 2 questions. One is, I assume somebody has already made the joke about Kirsten Sinema. The reason her last name is Sinema is because blank. Can you fill in that blank?
Because she's a drama queen?
Exactly. Is that joke already?
No, but I noticed she's a bisexual. She's a bisexual triathlete, and now she's bicameral too. So,
in the sense of, I mean, she's actually only
she's
in
a
the
senator
Senate.
who's working with the House.
I'm not sure which joke loses, but it's a close race.
Well, I would say
I think we both wisely refrained from tweeting our jokes. The fact that
I did hear a good joke the other day, but it's
Parrot Room only.
Too dirty.
Okay, I'm writing that down as our first Parrot Room item.
And it's not my joke. What are the ethics of stealing somebody else's joke? He probably stole it from somebody else too. So
yeah, all you have to do is say I stole it. You don't have to mention them. That's full credit in the joke stealing business.
So
I have one more technical question. When they say she hasn't even whipped the vote yet, whipping, I've heard it all my life, never been totally sure. Does it just mean going around getting firm commitments and using whatever leverage you can to get them?
Yes.
Okay.
I think that's what it means. It means you find out which way people are going, and then you focus on the people who are on the fence, a sort of triage, and you pressure them.
Mm-hmm.
But I think the really big pressure where Pelosi comes in and, wheels and deals is not technically whipping. That's something else. But Pelosi's idea was to hold the vote open, and it would be short, and then she would gradually work both sides, work the Democrats who are holding out, and maybe the Republicans who, 9 of them are going to vote for it because it's a good bill. And the leadership of the Republicans says don't vote for it, but she might be able to coax enough of them away to make the votes in the middle enough to pass it. That was her strategy. So, but whipping is just basically accounting and I think mild pressure.
Do you think age is an issue here? I mean, in terms of their inability to get this done. I mean, Pelosi and Biden, look, they're both in at least as good a shape as I'll be in at that age.
Pelosi seems to be uninhibited by age. She babbles a bit and says incoherent things, but she's done that for a while, and I think she's effective when she wants to be in it. This whole crazy strategy is her crazy strategy. So if it works, it's quite an impressive achievement. I mean, basically, what seems to have happened is, people like Jake Sherman, who I respect, when you try to follow these things from afar, you follow a few reporters, and Jake Sherman is one of them, and Heather Cagle is another, and Burgess Everett is another. But Sherman thinks the moderates blew it by insisting on a vote on a certain day, which was Monday, that got moved to Thursday, because then all the leverage was with the progressives. But so what? I mean, they were going to have it out at some point. It seems to me the moderates did Pelosi a huge favor by they're having it out now on an accelerated basis instead of, luxuriously having it out over months and months and months, when I don't think time is on Biden's side here. So I think
you wouldn't think
if you were Biden, you'd want to get it done now, and then you can figure out something else to do for the 3 months that remain before Christmas, But it would. So I don't the other issue is, would it have been better if they hadn't had this crazy two-bill strategy at all? And why was there a crazy two-bill strategy? Was it because Biden wanted to seem bipartisan, or was it because it was a way to maximize the progressives' influence by letting them hold this popular bill hostage? But
you mean, why did they split this into two bills to begin with, or why did they link them
and have one be bipartisan and one not? Why did they just have one big bill where the progressives have it out with the moderates, and they have a little infrastructure and a little soft infrastructure?
I don't know. It made sense.
And they come up with a big stew that satisfies enough people.
Made sense on paper. You get a bunch of stuff people like, and you can say you were a bipartisan president, and you get it done. But
he's not getting it done.
Well, on paper, I said it made sense. And then you've got this second thing that may seem tenuous until you come up with this genius strategy of saying that you're going to link the two and not vote on the hard in the House until you get the soft. But of course, that is kind of when things started falling apart. When Biden started blabbering about that, seemingly ill-advisedly. I mean, I don't know if there's a way they could have done that and kind of kept it semi-secret or something. I don't understand. I don't know. I'm not.
Biden went further than even your alleged deal would have it, and he said he would basically veto it unless the other bill. He just missed. He wildly exaggerated it.
Whoa.
He said, "I'm not signing it," but he only has so many days to sign it, or else it's a pocket veto, I think. So
yeah, they could have just let that get conveyed quietly to Democrats, I think. And even if it gets out kind of publicly, it's not the same as him saying
it's sort of ridiculous. It looks bad. It was like, here's a good bipartisan bill that everybody loves, but I'm not going to give it to you now unless I get my shitty partisan bill. That's the way the narrative is going. And if you read the New York Times piece today by Jonathan Weissman, of whom I have the word?
Only the lowest regard.
The minimal high regard. I hold minimal high regard. Yes. But he's a big lib. He's a hothead, but he's a big lib. He's heaping abuse on the progressives for delaying this infrastructure bill. Okay. So the party line of the New York Times is now what I'm talking about, which is progressives getting shit for holding up this hard achieved bill to get their pie in the sky, liberal soft social welfare bloat. So if even Weissman is saying it, I mean, that's sort of the mainstream.
Huh.
I don't know. So it could be happening even as we speak, and it could happen, and something's going to happen eventually. But and luckily the public, I don't think, cares about any of this.
Well, I mean, the cause for hope is that it is, in theory, in the interest of all Democrats to get a version of soft infrastructure passed and hard infrastructure passed.
Getting nothing passed is the version of the prisoner's dilemma where both sides end up going to the electric chair.
Well, they both get a longer sentence. Yeah.
So, and I guess that does happen sometimes, right?
Well, it does. I mean, it certainly happens in real life. I mean, for one thing, human psychology plays a role. Even politicians sometimes just get pissed off. But the other thing is just the way their individual calculations play out. I mean, some of them, I think, really need specific packages, they think, for political purposes, specific parts of the package. And
who are you thinking of? I don't think the progressives are like that. The progressives just need to show they put up a good fight. They're in the sitter business. I'm
speaking, in pure game theory, the way you wind up screwing each other while being in some sense rational is if it's an iterated thing. So in other words, you want to establish a credibility of your signaling for next time around, right? That's when it's actually kind of that's when, even if you're communicating with each other in the prisoner's dilemma, and it's when you can't communicate that it's the classic prisoner's dilemma, but it's these guys can communicate with each other, but it could still make sense to die on their sword if they're thinking, well, we'll go through this game again a year from now, 2 years from now. They have to know I mean business. It's the signaling.
But the whole basis of this is that it's not iterative, that they're not going to do it again. This is their last chance to spend. and they're going to lose the Congress, and there ain't going to be no more chances.
That's a good point. I mean, there still are things that they bargain over. You always bargain as a member of Congress. So you could say that it's part of their generic credibility establishing, but you're right that the stakes are, the Democrats aren't going to have the potential to do this much for a while.
Yeah. I mean, I guess I was distinguishing guys like Gottheimer, who sort of has to do something about the state and local tax deduction, and Manchin, who has to do something about coal, and the progressives, who would be ecstatic if they got parts of their agenda, but don't really have to do it to get reelected because they're in the I'm a progressive standing up to the man business. And it helps if they're perceived as successful and if they're perceived as bossing the moderates around, but they don't really have to get any one thing, I don't think.
Well, that's what could kill this then. If they'd rather be seen screwing Joe Manchin.
No, I think they want to be seen as having be the new power in Congress. That's what they want to be seen as.
Well, so they'd like to actually win, but
they'd like to achieve something. But if they could achieve, Manchin lets them achieve something. It's 1.5 trillion. They can do a lot with 1.5 trillion. The dangerous thing is that they use 1.5 trillion. There was this little store in New York called the Department Store, and it was like a department store. It had a shoe department which had one pair of shoes, and a suit department which had one suit. It had like.
Wait, was it a joke store? What are you talking about?
No, I think they said this is our we think this is the best pair of shoes to sell. It was a very fashionable store, but nobody. But the bill could be like that. It could start 12 programs, but only for a year, on the grounds that once you start them, you'll never stop them. So the 1.5 trillion could balloon into 6 trillion by year 10.
Yeah.
So I mean, the evil child tax credit is only now authorized to 2025, and they could cut that back further because it's wildly expensive. Of course, that's its problem. It's basically giving cash to 30% of the entire population. Wildly expensive. So anyway, it remains to be seen whether Pelosi's a genius or flailing. She looked like she was flailing. Now she looks sort of like a potential genius.
I don't know, man. It's not looking like that to me so far, but maybe you know something I know.
And Mickey's in agony. Let the record show that if they went back to the old rules about the child tax credit, which is you have to earn $2,500, I don't care about the rest of the bill. They can pass it as far as it has some good things in it. It has some bad things in it. I don't care. I certainly don't oppose it.
Wait, you have to earn $2,500 per year?
Correct.
Well, that's not a very high floor.
No.
So you could work a couple of months a year and get the tax credit.
Yeah. And many people, it's like the earned income tax credit. Many people just lie. And so the IRS spends a lot of manpower cracking down on people lying. But I guess, one assumes that they've figured out how to make it harder to lie on this.
Yeah.
And you also have to have a child. So it's if you look at the unemployment fraud in California, it's like $20 billion. Okay. It's massive. So with computers, people have figured out how to commit fraud on a huge scale. So you do have to worry about temptations to lie.
So what else is going on in this crazy old world?
I don't understand what's going on with the pandemic. 80% of the population is vaccinated in many states, yet we're told the hospital wards are overflowing. It's the infection is rampant. Well, if they're vaccinated, how could it be that bad? And when you look at the death rates, it's not that bad. So
wait, the death rates the caseload is dropping very clearly. The death
in the nation, but in the states, in the states where Matt Drudge has links saying Alaska overwhelmed despite being vaxxed, the cases are going through the roof. Only like the last 2 days have they started to drop. And the deaths have gone up a bit, not a lot, but they have gone up a bit. But I think mainly what's happening is that people are getting sick but not dying, which is better than getting sick and dying.
Well, I mean, they're not dying is consistent with a high vax rate. I mean, one thing vaccination
does. That would be explaining what's happened.
Yeah, well, that's all good. So what's the mystery?
The mystery is
why the cases are rising.
Why are they filling up the hospital wards? How sick could they be? And the purpose of the vax was to stop people from having to go to the hospital.
Well, yeah, but Delta proved more challenging for the vax than the original virus. Still seems to do a pretty good job of keeping you from dying.
It's just hard for me to reconcile the scare headlines on Drudge with the chart that you saw, which shows that the case rate is going down finally.
In the nation, it clearly is. Even the death rate. I'll check again, but as of yesterday, it had been kind of on a mild decline for the last few days. Has clearly been on at least a plateau for a week or so. I don't know. I mean, I guess the good news is I haven't read about any new variants, any new scary variants. Have you? I mean, we heard about Delta.
But it's hard. I don't quite understand
up.
The mechanism by which all the variants disappear. I mean, you would think there would have to be something to take Delta's place, but maybe not. There's a pill.
Yeah, now that's interesting. So Merck has a pill. It's a therapy for the disease, not a prophylactic. But they say it cuts the chances of something in half. Hospitalization. What is it? Something in half? Yeah. Maybe dying in half. It's interesting because I remember, the whole Brett Weinstein ivermectin thing back months ago when people would say, but wait, even Merck is saying that ivermectin is not to be trusted for this. And Merck makes ivermectin. The Weinsteinian line was, yeah, but Merck's got a drug backstage that's about to come out that they can charge a lot more for. That is a COVID therapy. They can charge more for it because it is still under patent protection. Yeah. And so anyway, here that drug is.
Well, at this point, I'd be happy to let Merck have their money.
Yeah,
if it actually does. The interesting thing is that people are thinking that maybe the Biden administration will want to downplay this pill because everything is about the vax for them. And if people think there's a pill, they'll be less likely to take the vax. So they would just assume this announcement had been put off for a month or so.
In a way, maybe so. And it is kind of a downside if it leads fewer people to get vaxxed. Now, you were Moderna, right?
I was Moderna, and my initial sentiment was I don't want to take a booster shot because I have this arthritis-like symptom, and what if it makes it worse? And now I'm thinking I don't want to be non-immune, so I'm desperate for the booster shot.
Yeah, but Moderna, you don't need a booster so soon, do you?
Well, I don't know. I got it in April. So when do you need a booster? 5-6 months, right?
I think sooner for Pfizer than Moderna, according to the data. For Pfizer, they're saying 6 months. I'm not quite old enough to qualify for the booster unless, well, it's a long story. But anyway, I did get Pfizer, and they are saying that I'd be in theory, ready for a booster if I qualify.
Okay, and you're going to get it?
Well, I'm not sure if they've changed the rules on what qualifies you to get it if you're under 65, because they do that on a state-by-state basis.
Well, this is the point. The messaging on the booster is almost as bad as the messaging for this show. I wouldn't
go that far, but it's bad. It's really bad.
But it's confusing. I mean, do they want us to take the booster? Do they not want us to take the booster? The agencies of the government are fighting. I get no clear guidance when I read the papers or the web. What am I supposed to do? I guess I'll call my doctor and ask him what to do, but it seems like there should be a message that doesn't require you to call your doctor. So I just think it's a fuck up that might hurt Biden more than not passing this bill.
Wait, which part is the fuck up that would hurt Biden?
The bad messaging
on
does the Biden administration want us to get boosters or not?
They want you to get a booster if you're 65 or older.
Have they said that clearly?
They've said it for Pfizer people, I think.
Yeah.
I mean, the FDA, didn't the FDA approve
They overruled their own scientists, I believe. Yes.
And approved the booster. I
Yes,
mean, the argument against it is that, the rest of the world needs vaccines more than we do. And arguably even, maybe we need for the rest of the world to get vaccines more than we need them. If you look at where the new variants.
Well, that would be the argument that would appeal to me. Otherwise, I say, fasten your oxygen mask before you help the person next to you. But
now speaking of your imagined symptoms about hip discomfort, Mickey.
I'm experiencing it even as we speak, Bob.
This is a great segue. Are you actually?
Yeah, because when I switch to this hard chair from the chair I usually sit in, it hurts a bit. Yeah.
And you're saying this is totally post-vax.
But it happened 5 days after the vax, so maybe it's not vax related. On the other hand, joint pain is one of the side effects of the vax.
Now, doesn't roughly every 5 days bring a new form of joint pain for a person of your advanced age?
No.
Does for me. So anyway, speaking of symptoms that may or may not be true, this whole Havana Syndrome thing?
Yeah.
Where, so initially people in, I guess, the U.S. Embassy or consulate or whatever in Havana said they had nausea, headaches, whatever. And then you started hearing, also some of our workers in Russia or in here or in there. And pretty soon you were hearing that this was happening all over the world and people were taking very seriously. There was a New York Times piece that took very seriously the idea that this was the result of some hostile power using some kind of microwave weapon or maybe some microwave-related surveillance technology they were using, having this as a side effect. And it's still, I've been skeptical all along. I mean, I remember.
And now they're saying it's psychosomatic?
Well, there was just a piece in the Daily Beast that was about a report that the State Department commissioned, and the Beast got a hold of it. It wasn't a leak. I think it wasn't classified. It was just a FOIA thing, but the Beast was the first to get a hold of it. And I assume they commissioned a study with these reputable scientists. And there were a couple of things. They said, first of all, it could well be what they called psychogenic. In other words, just kind of this group psychology thing where you start hearing that other people are sick and you either imagine symptoms of your own or attribute unrelated symptoms to this syndrome thing. But they also said, in Havana originally, a number of people reported they heard this sound, this strange sound, and then it's roughly the same time they had the symptoms. And the report says the most likely source of that sound is this exotic species of cricket in Cuba. This some cricket from the Indies. Indies is in its name. And they said, in any event, how did they put it? That, I mean, I'll get it up and quote from it because I've got a little item on this in my newsletter. But the basic idea was there's no way that something could be responsible, that the thing that they were hearing, I want to quote it so I don't get it wrong, but we're getting there. Quote from the report: no plausible single source of energy, neither radio, microwaves, nor sonic, radio/microwaves, nor sonic, can produce both the recorded audio video signals and the reported medical effects. So, I think the State Department is not dropping the matter, but it was pretty sketchy to begin with, I gotta say.
Has anybody died from this?
No, I think some people report enduring symptoms, but I think, months ago on this podcast, I quoted you the seemingly ridiculous thing in this New York Times piece that took this very seriously. And they said, somewhere in the world, they didn't specify where, somewhere in the world, a military officer, well, there's a lot of military officers somewhere in the world, drove up to an intersection, started feeling nauseous. The baby in the back seat started crying. Then when he pulled out of the intersection, he no longer felt bad and the baby quit crying. Well, first of all, I always feel better when a baby quits crying, okay? And sometimes I start feeling bad when they start crying. But first of all, just And I was listening to this podcast, this Ben Rhodes, Tommy Vietor podcast. It's part of the, it's Pod Save the World, part of the Pod Save America thing. They're really they're still, well, they taped this before this Beast piece, I think, but they're taking this very serious. I mean, they sound like sure there's something there. It just seems to me kind of nuts to be assigning a very high probability to the idea that all of these people in these far-flung places are victims of a single thing. I don't know. Maybe
you have to listen to Ben Rhodes and Tommy Vietor as part of your blob monitoring activities. I'm so sorry for you.
It's in it. Why do you say it? So you're familiar with
boring
both
talk
of them?
about foreign policy.
Oh, just boring. Well, I don't find foreign policy boring. I find there are things about it I like and things about it that annoy me.
Those two at least wouldn't talk in foreign policy speak.
I'll elaborate in the period.
They probably talk in real English, right?
Yeah, because neither one of them, I think fun. I mean, remember Ben Rhodes when he started, the way he became, his path to being an Obama national security aide began with his being in the creative writing program at NYU. I mean, he was in the graduate program there, and somehow that led to his writing speeches for Obama, and that led him to being a foreign policy guy. But I'm gonna talk about that a little more in the Parrot Room, maybe. Oh, also in the Parrot Room, by the way, I'm going to talk about what a bad idea it is to go to Mickey Kaus for advice on what you should write about in your newsletter.
Okay. Anyway, I wanted to talk about something now from last week, which is involving replacement theory. Remember that's gotten a big boost this week because somebody, I guess it was in Politico, said, replacement theory is now going mainstream. There are a couple of Republican congressmen who've talked about it, and it's racist. Okay.
Well, we had a big argument about this in the Parrot Room last week, did we not?
Okay, in the Parrot Room. Well, we can have an argument about it here because I've always thought that any community, when it senses itself swamped or overrun with new people who are changing the community, they get pissed off and annoyed, and this is a natural human thing, and you should respect it. For example, in D.C., the Black community was always talking about the plan, and the plan was white people move in and they take over Shaw and the ghetto, and the Black people move out, and it becomes a wide area, and their community is destroyed. And nobody said, "Oh, you're racist for thinking that." They said, "Oh, they gave it some credence, and in fact, it's exactly what happened."
Yeah, but do you think there was a plan? Do you think there was a plan? But do you think there was a plan?
No, but the plan was the conspiratorial superstructure on this basic natural human sentiment. And when white people feel the same way, Bob, where is your fabled cognitive empathy? Why don't you understand the legitimate point, which is the fear of your community changing forever? And in fact, specifically, if you're an employee, of actually being replaced by somebody who was just imported or just came across the border. Why don't you have any cognitive empathy for those people?
By cognitive empathy, you mean why don't I understand what their perspective is? That's what cognitive empathy means. I understand what their perspective is.
Don't you have to somehow give it, not just understand it, but give it credence?
No, you just have to understand it. You just have to understand. I mean, maybe it's implied that, that's the way they would see it if they have that exact perspective, but that's almost definitionally true of all perspectives in the world. If you were that person, you'd see the world the way they do.
So it doesn't involve any giving it respect or giving it props or anything. I'll remember that next time you talk about cognitive empathy for what China feels, that you're saying it could be completely crazy. It's just it's racist, but all you're doing is you're understanding what they think. No, you're not doing that. You're giving it some respect.
No, you're wrong. You're absolutely wrong. When I say I want to extend cognitive empathy to Putin or Assad, I'm not saying I sympathize with the things they do. I'm saying if you're going to deal with them effectively, you better understand the way they see the world. You better understand the way Syrians see the world, the way Russians see the world. You better, for example, understand that there's no such thing as an autocrat in the real world. All of these people have actual popular support of some magnitude. You better understand the way those people see those rulers, why they support them, and things like that. No, you should keep value judgments entirely out of the cognitive empathy business. Your job is just to value judgments are what impede cognitive empathy. It's like, and people try to use impute value judgments to you to discourage you from exercising cognitive empathy. You say, well, I think here's the way Assad looks at it. You go, oh, you're an Assad apologist, are you? No, I'm not. I'm just trying to understand him. So, but to get back to the replacement thing. So first of all, that's the answer to that question. Have I been clear?
You've been clear. We'll see if you hew to this hard line in the future.
And maybe we'll see it in the Parrot Room. But the other thing I said last week in the Parrot Room, this is what we had the big argument about, is replacement theory isn't just what you just described. In other words, them feeling threatened and or dislocated by a rapid change in kind of ethnic composition. That is what you just described is a common feature of human affairs. It shouldn't surprise us when people react that way. And we should take it into account and deal with it one way or the other. But replacement theory is beyond that. It is, as you said, the idea that there is a plan. This is planned. I mean, replacement theory is often paired with white genocide, right? They're trying to wipe us out.
This is a semantic argument.
It's saying not just semantic.
It wouldn't be semantic if the congressmen were saying, and replacement theory is real and the Jews are running it. But they don't say that. They just say, people are worried about being replaced, and the press goes, oh, so you're saying the Jews are running it. No, they're not saying that.
But Mickey,
oh, this is replacement theory. You're mainstreaming anti-Semitism. No, you're not. They're just stating the reasonable feelings of large parts of their constituents, and then people like you come along and say, oh, that's anti-Semitism. Well, there are people who are anti-Semitic.
Well, first of all,
but there are also a lot of people who just, felt that felt their communities were threatened, and they wanted to find out if anybody could give them guidance.
First of all, I haven't said it's anti-Semitism. If I reflect on it a while, I may be willing to say that, but I haven't said it. But what I would say is,
well, the ADL has weighed in big time on this. So
well, you know about my spotty, my checkered past with the ADL. So
all I'm saying is it's popularly perceived as an anti-Semitic, is Jews being involved.
Okay, well, what I would say is, when Tucker Carlson goes around throwing around the word replacement very often, he knows fucking well what he's doing. And one thing he's doing is nourishing the conspiracy theorists who subscribe to replacement theory per se. He knows it. Are you saying he doesn't know that, Mickey?
No, he knows it. But one of the functions of public figures is to take the reasonable demands of crazy people and thereby sap the strength from their movement. I'm not saying that's what he's doing.
It's the opposite of what he's doing.
He's obviously playing footsie with them, but you're allowed to say, yes, these people have this beef, but they have this also crazy theory that's wrong. It is perfectly reasonable to say, look, the people in Shaw in DC were completely reasonable to fear that whites were taking over their neighborhood and that would change it forever.
But there wasn't a plot.
It probably was a plot among various real estate investors, but
that's not the kind of plot they mean.
I don't know what kind of plot. I think they meant all kinds of plots, but
but let's get back to Tucker. You did describe a constructive role that Tucker Carlson could play. What you described is definitely not what he's doing. Are you defending what he is doing?
No. That's a fair criticism that he's not playing the constructive role that he could play. But just because you mentioned the word replacement doesn't mean you're endorsing the whole conspiracy
Not
theory.
All people who use it do that. And he is not explicitly endorsing it. But he knows damn well one way that's juicing his ratings.
There was a great story in BuzzFeed of all places, BuzzFeed, which calls everybody, I think including me, a racist. He had this great story about a farm in Georgia where the foreman came out and say, all you Americans, you're fired. We've hired immigrants to replace you, okay? Those Americans, it seems to me, are allowed to think they've been replaced because they were replaced.
Oh, yeah. They were literally replaced.
Okay.
If their theory is that they were replaced, that theory is correct. So I don't have anything to add. I think I've maintained my calm much better than I did last time we discussed replacement
I know I'm
theory.
very annoyed by that, but it seems to me you should have actual empathy as opposed to just cognitive empathy. If people are suffering, you should
have
actually
empathy.
empathize.
You should
i.e.
have empathy.
Have feelings. Have feelings. For
you should
them.
have empathy for everyone who is suffering. Literally everyone, including the most monstrous criminals. That's my actual philosophy. Now, do I go around spending my time feeling everyone's pain? No. That's life.
Don't you have more empathy for people who aren't monstrous criminals?
Naturally, I do. But as a philosophical matter, I believe that everyone deserves compassion. And if I had been born in Charles Manson's shoes, I would have been Charles Manson. So
it's okay. Cut. We have our pull quote. That's like,
you think we can go viral with that one?
When I spent like a day on the 1988 campaign. And the reason Sam Donaldson is famous is because he Dukakis would be up there talking. For younger viewers,
he was an ABC News guy.
Is he still alive? Did he pass
personality.
Away?
What? Well, he's not practicing. Oh God, he's got to be. I'll bet. Let's place. You want to go ahead and place a bet on whether he's alive, and then I'll settle it.
I
right.
think he died. I think he died. But
wait, you can't change your tune. I'm on the death side of the bet.
Okay. Anyway,
and it's for $1 billion. And
no, it's not for $1 billion. It's for $1 trillion.
Actually, I'm not sure I want to bet. I don't think I want to bet.
So he would be yelling from the back, from like behind the cameras. Would Dukakis be talking? He says, "Okay, we have our soundbite. We can go home now.
Yeah.
Cut." And Dukakis would still be talking, and it was hilarious. I mean, it was incredibly rude, but it was hilarious.
He wasn't joking. He was talking to his camera people.
He was half joking and half making fun of his profession, and another half serious. So 3 halves. But
one other little. Let's see. We probably are about. Yeah, we're about ready to sign off. We're closing in on an hour. Quick thing on Guinea that I found out. So I don't know if you knew there was this kind of, well, funny is not the word, but embarrassing moment for the U.S. war on terror, where in Guinea, as in so many countries, I mean, as in like literally, I think like 40 countries or something, we had American troops like training their special forces on anti-terrorism grounds, right? To be these better fighters of terrorism.
Right.
There's a specific special forces unit, the elite unit in Guinea. And so we're training them, they're good at what they do. And while the instructors training them were asleep, they went off and staged a coup. They took over the fucking country. And at the time, I thought that was the indictment of the war on terror. Just showed how kind of clueless we are. But I learned even more about that. That's more damning about the way we're conducting the war on terror. I was listening to Mark Leon Goldberg's podcast, Global Dispatches, and he was interviewing some guy from, I think, Guinea, but definitely an African guy. You could tell by the accent, who really knew the territory. And he said, the funny thing about this elite force is it was created by the president who was deposed. And what this guy said is, the president said at the time that it was a special anti-terrorism force, but, insiders knew that he was creating it to be his own special protection force because he was afraid of being overthrown. So it's kind of funny and ironic that they wound up overthrowing him. But it is a really serious point that, we go in, these leaders say, yeah, we're on your side in the war on terror. Come help us train and equip these troops. And the U.S. just falls for it. We have no fucking idea what's going on.
Well, the same thing happened in Afghanistan on a much larger scale.
Yeah. I mean, it really, we need to get ambitious about reining in this war on terror and bring people back from a whole lot of countries.
Did I dream that there was a coup in Tunisia, which was the only successful Arab Spring?
No, you didn't dream that. There was a coup in Tunisia, which was until then the only successful Arab Spring thing.
Huh. Was that recently?
Yeah, pretty recent. I think the guy, and I think within the last week or two, he took another step. I think originally he had claimed it was legit so long as he didn't go a year without doing something or other, like call elections and blah, blah, blah. But I think he's now gone further, and it's clearer and clearer that, I think,
that he's going into the anti-democratic direction.
Well, that he's not letting go. I mean, imagine if we had spent a small fraction of the resources. One thing that happened in Tunisia is it had tremendous economic problems, and that's going to be bad for any fledgling democracy. And one reason a lot of countries kind of like that are having economic problems is because they had been somewhat dependent on tourism, and COVID wiped that out. Yeah. But if we had spent a fraction of what we spent on Afghanistan, trying to nourish the economy, that's assuming we do a good job of it. But as usual, it wasn't the focus. Anyway, yeah. That's bad.
Here's a bet that you might win, you might not. The drone strike that killed this innocent family in Kabul after it fell. Apparently, a journalist named Lara Seligman, I think is her name, has written
I know her father.
A good account of how it came to be. And I bet if we read that account, we will discover at some point political pressure from the Biden administration to do something to make it look like better to leave Kabul, or to do a little macho gesture or something to make us look slightly more successful came into the equation.
Wait, you're saying if we read her account, we'll see that, or at some point if we read?
Well, either way, I suspect it's in her account. But
I haven't read the account. We had this argument before. I mean,
right, and I'm saying this is more evidence.
I certainly don't believe that anybody, remember Henry Kissinger's famous instructions for the bombing of, I think, Cambodia. What was it? Get anything in the flies. Get anything that flies to bomb anything that moves. I don't think it was quite that cynical. I can't believe that anybody said or thought we just need a kill. Doesn't matter if they're civilians or not. I don't believe anybody said or thought that, in part because you can't cover this shit up as easily as you used to.
Well,
they're going to find out.
Nobody's being explicit. All I'm saying is at some point they call the White House, and the White House puts whatever the equivalent of Ben Rhodes on the phone, and they say, should we do this or not? And he goes, well, why don't you do it? That would be the avenue by which craven politics.
I think the pressure was of a different sort. They had the one horrific bombing at the airport, and I think the Biden administration very much wanted not to have another bombing. And I think there was some intelligence that there would be one. And so if they erred on the side of permissiveness, I think that was the reason. And I'm sure they did err on the side of permissiveness. And you see why, this happens or how it happens. It's like, so I guess this started out, they saw this car that went to some house that they had been told was some kind of terrorist haven or something. It turns out they were wrong. But anyway, once they started following this car, it was going around picking up things at various places. And I think they thought, now that's weird. Most cars don't stop and pick shit up at a bunch of places. Yeah, on the other hand, most terrorist bombings don't fucking involve that either. They build the bomb and they go to the fucking target. Yeah. But this just shows you how bad confirmation bias is. Once you've got the theory, oh, these are the bad guys, it's like, oh, that's weird. That's weird. Let's kill them.
Well, anyway, that's the bet. You're saying it's legitimate fear of terror, and I'm saying that politics and making Biden look good entered into it. So we'll see.
Well, let's be clear. What are you saying the nature of the instructions are that we'll find? That they'll say, make us look good politically?
Any instructions. We'll just find that at some point, it was not just bias about being worried about a terrorist attack. It was bias induced by the need for Biden to strike some sort of blow
we need to live,
made him look good.
We need one last bombing before we go.
Sort of the parting shot.
I don't, maybe I'm not cynical enough, but I think this would be the first time in my life that was the case.
Or a victory. But you vehemently resisted this idea, so you lose the bet.
I just don't think it's the case, because I don't think it's a hypothesis you need, given how much pressure there was on them to prevent another bombing.
Just the fact that you don't need it doesn't mean it didn't happen.
Hypothesis non fingo. What is that quote? I don't even know if that's it, but I think in Latin that means I have no need of that hypothesis.
We didn't discuss.
Wait, Mickey, we're up over an hour. We can't.
Okay, I'll be quick.
Be very quick.
I'll be quick. We have to get this Wade Newton is a success in Las Vegas because he says, no, I know we're supposed to stop, but I can't stop. We got to go on. We're having such a good time. Hold the curtain. Okay. Makes it look like he's breaking all the rules.
You want to be the Wayne Newton of podcasting?
I wish. We're breaking all the rules here, Bob.
First of all,
we're busting through our time limit.
Most people aren't old enough to remember who Wayne Newton was, and that's another bet we could make. Is Wayne Newton alive? There's a
famous profile of Wayne Newton in some magazine about how he puts on the show that makes this point. It may have been written by Ron Rosenbaum or is told about it by Ron Rosenbaum. Anyway, and it's billed as the greatest magazine piece ever written. And everybody says, oh, bullshit. And then they read it and they say, that was the greatest magazine piece ever written. Yeah. So what can I say?
I don't know. Why don't you say the thing you were going to say before we signed off so we can sign off?
The border crisis has seemingly been resolved. The 12,000 Haitian migrants have gone from under the bridge in Del Rio, Texas. The 2,000 or so of them have been flown back to Haiti. The vast majority of them were released into the country. They got in. So they'll be given appointments for hearings that they don't really have to show up at, et cetera, et cetera. And even if they lose the hearing, they can just still stay. So they're here to stay. The question is what deterrent effect this has on the hundreds of thousands of other people who are in Latin America, not all Latin Americans, waiting to come here. And Todd Bensman of Center on Immigration Studies has, to my mind, done by far the best reporting on this. He's not that ideological. He discovered why did 12,000 Haitians all of a sudden descend on Del Rio, Texas? Mm-hmm. Answer A, they were bottled up by the Mexicans. The Trump administration had gotten the Mexicans to bottle them up in the south of Mexico. And the Biden administration had gotten the Mexicans to continue this policy. But then all of a sudden they decided, well, we have a holiday coming up called El Grito, and we don't want all these Haitians around, being a public issue. And they said, okay, you guys got 3 days to leave the country. And they all bust up north to get into America. So the Mexicans started this sort of jailbreak-like thing. And they all went to Del Rio, Texas, because there are no cartels that charge money for getting in through Del Rio, Texas. So it's free. So that's why they all converged on Del Rio, because it's the bargain basement entry point.
Well, I was about to say these are some pretty well-informed migrants, but I know you would say exactly that's what you don't understand and go on a whole riff about other stuff. So I'm not going to say
They're
that.
Extremely well-informed. They get all the latest info on your.
I didn't say it. I didn't say it. I pretend I didn't say it.
They know that the composition of Denny Hastert's committee that applied the Hastert rule to block amnesty. I mean, they know everything.
You wouldn't go that far, but.
But Bensman also reports that the flights to Haiti were an incredibly effective deterrent. There were like 5,000 Haitians that immediately went back to Mexico when they saw this happen, because they were terrified.
Well, so as you said, Haiti wasn't even their home. They hadn't been there in years. So it's like...
Well, they hadn't been there since 2010, yeah. So
yeah, well, shit, that's weird. I wouldn't want to go to any country I hadn't been in 10 years. That ain't home.
Well, that gave it.
So this is different from your garden variety.
They presumably could have gone back at any time. So there's a reason why they didn't go back.
Yeah,
they didn't want to be there, right?
Shape. Yeah.
So the question is, does this deterrent outweigh all the pro-deterrence that Biden is also instituting, like Mayorkas announcing today that we're not going to deport anybody who isn't a criminal, who doesn't commit a crime in addition to coming into the country illegally. Mm-hmm. So that basically says you're home free. If you get in, you're home free. That's a huge magnet, right? And the fact that you're going to likely get in the first place is a huge magnet. But does picking a sort of minority and actually shipping them back home actually counteract this magnet force with a deterrent force? What will happen? That's the big issue. I don't think anybody knows. There's 60,000 Haitians on the way. There are hundreds of thousands of people of other nationalities. Are they all going to come, or are they now going to be deterred? I actually don't know the answer. I think I know what the answer is, but I don't know.
Seems imponderable. So this is not something we should take up in the Parrot Room because we just don't know.
No. Oh, we should talk about it a lot, but
okay, we should.
Hours and hours. A spin-off show.
Okay, we'll do a spin-off on this.
Maybe on Carlos Watson's Aussie network, which is something we should talk about in the Parrot Room.
Okay, Aussie Network. I'm writing down things we're going to talk about in the Parrot Room. Remember, you've got some stolen joke you alluded to earlier that you're going to tell us. I'm going to say, yeah, you remember that earlier? It was only an hour ago. We can rack our brains and remember that. I've got one little anecdote from the best and brightest that's Trump related. Wait, what does this say? Mickey's bad shit. That you could fill that in with so many things.
Really?
I don't know what that last word is. I wrote that down. Mickey's bad advice. Mickey's bad.
Oh, I gave advice for what topics to pick to write about.
Oh yeah, newsletter. Yeah, my newsletter. I'll get to that. I'm on the Rhodes Vietor podcast. I have a confession about why I don't like Tommy Vietor. It's all going to come out. Our argument last week in the Parrot Room, and I was chastised by commenters. I was chastised both by commenters for this podcast for being rude and commenters for the Parrot Room for losing my cool because you successfully trolled me, which, by the way, has not happened so far in this podcast. It will not happen in the Parrot Room. Okay, good luck.
I don't think you're rude when I troll you. I think you're entertaining when I troll you.
I know you, and you always say at the end, "No, you were good, Bob. You were good." That's because you want me to make a fool of myself.
That's like when I went on Crossfire and they said I was the best guest they'd had since Rabbi Kahana. They
who was assassinated for his efforts.
Sorry,
wasn't he assassinated later? Yeah. Well, yeah. Not on set. This isn't
after I had appeared, and they weren't saying you're going to be assassinated.
This isn't Network.
They were saying you were a crazy hothead, and that's good TV.
Right. Well, I don't want to be the crazy hothead anyway, but I do want to explain more why I was triggered. Not so much by the replacement theory thing, but by your defending the Willie Horton ad from the back in the Dukakis, the Bush Dukakis campaign. Aussie Network. Maybe talk about that immigration conundrum you just and whatever else.
I was joking about that.
Okay, we're not.
The answer is I think they'll still come. I think the incentive is stronger than the deterrent. But
and maybe I'll renew my flagging effort to get you to try a dating app. It's looking like it's an uphill struggle, but
yeah, that's not going to happen.
Mickey, don't spoil drain the drama from it.
I'm draining the drama.
Anything else?
I have a nominee. I was going to talk about Willie Horton too. So what the hell?
Excellent.
I have a nominee for a potential guest.
Okay, guest nominee. We need those.
Have a mystery of the mystery of the cloned horse. We'll talk about horse cloning, Bob.
Can't wait.
And something about libel law that I didn't know. What reckless disregard is and why it's important.
Well, that's always relevant because on my last podcast, the one that aired this Tuesday, we talked about Eric Weinstein's not so veiled libel threats. And maybe this will give us an excuse to bring a little Weinstein into the Parrot Room. So anyway, it's at patreon.com/Parrot Room. And other ways you can show us love include smashing the like button, following Mickey at @CousMickey, following me at Robert Ryder, subscribing to the Non-Zero newsletter or Cows Files. What else, Mickey? That's about it, isn't it?
Yeah, I also have an Ezra Klein point, not a very good one.
Well, you should, you've got about half a book's worth of not so great Ezra Klein points, so you might as well.
Oh, that was a cheap shot, Bob.
I'm sorry, I feel bad, but as you know, I consider Ezra Klein a god among men.
I know that's becoming your catchphrase. And we could talk about the Biden administration's crazy idea. Maybe you buy it, that all these things they're proposing have zero cost.
Oh, yeah, I think that's easy for me to dispatch. Okay. Biden, zero cost. And then, we'll go over some commenters' comments and just have a crazy time. It's a wild place.
And we'll break all the rules.
Oh, I'm going to talk more about drugs.
Like talk. Wayne Newton.
Drug talk. And Mickey will do his Wayne Newton impression.
No, I'm not going to do a Wayne Newton impression.
No. Okay. All right.
Dankeschön, darling. Dankeschön.
Okay. Thank you, Mickey. We'll see you in the Parrot Room.